Another way in which we work is that we do campaigns, and just before the European Parliament elections in June, we did a lot of work at the European level and with our members in the member state level to basically mobilize high-level and grassroots support and to ensure a better representation in the European Parliament and the European Commission for the elections. Can I tell you that after the elections, Malta still doesn't have a female MEP? I mean, we have achieved a little bit, but not as much as we would have liked to. We had about 300 people who can make a difference at the European level who signed our campaign, ranging from Mr. Barroso to Bibiana Aido, who's the Minister for Equality in Spain. It's a very long list, and I see you can see an example there. We have a website where you can see all the 300 signatories. So what are we doing now? Now that they've signed and on their website, we go back to them and ask them, so you said that, what are you going to do about it? And we're trying to hold them accountable in public sphere. We also work at the regional level and with government agencies, and that has been a very fruitful cooperation. So we worked a lot on trafficking against women, especially in the Nordic and Baltic countries. We facilitate networking between NGOs that do not have access to European decision makers. So instead of saying, I mean, I get invited to a lot of conferences, and all the time they say, okay, talk to us about your ideas on gender and migration. And at some point we thought, well, we shouldn't be talking about gender and migration. It should be migrant women themselves that do the talking. So in the last 3 years, we invested a lot of time and energy and money from funders to facilitate the space for a European network of migrant women to be formed. They're represented in 15 member states at the moment. And we had the launched last week, where Virginia was also able to make an intervention. We had about 110 stakeholders there, and I'm very happy that now these women have direct access to speak to policymakers themselves. And we do a lot of lobbying. Actually, this is most of what we do. So we've been trying to work a lot on the new anti-discrimination directive proposed by the European Commission in collaboration with the social platform. That is basically a network of networks. The AWL is one of 42 networks. So it's absolutely huge and represents millions of people across Europe. I will skip some. I want to concentrate on this for a second. This is very simplified, so for the lawyers in the audience, please excuse me. But I'm just trying to make a point. If you look at the first column, the yellow column, orange there, okay, you will see that the RAISE directive basically covers many different areas, all areas. It's a very comprehensive directive back from the year 2000 in relation to anti-discrimination, both in employment and outside employment. If you look at the proposed directive that the European Commission is putting forward, and we are very much in favor and pushing for that directive to go through, we're very happy with it, you will see that all the gray area will also be covered when it comes to age, sexual orientation, disability, and belief. So, from 57, where you saw equal pay, equal work in the treaty, we come 50 years down the road to find that the proposals for the least protected ground of discrimination is gender. So to borrow from Miguel, I think we must be doing something terribly wrong. Somebody asked in the room before, a colleague from Slovenia, about intersectionality and what about multiple levels of discrimination. I know it's not the same term, but just using that. So it's very important when we think of women and men, of course. There are women and men in different categories and experiencing different forms of discrimination. And I don't think there is a bigger challenge for the Union at the moment than to address that, to use an intersectional perspective in the gender equality policies. It's a very hard task. It's a task that hardly has been addressed. There's no gender equality perspective in the anti-discrimination policies. And then, of course, there's very big question marks on how to address multiple discrimination at the national level and the EU level and ensure protection of victims. And I think both the Gender Institute and the Fundamental Rights Agency have a very big role to play to that effect. I won't talk about the roadmap because Daniela has already covered that a little bit. But this proposed new strategy for equality of the European Commission presented before for 2010-2015 goes with a lot of challenges. And I'd like us to be vigilant of these challenges, and I'd like us to think of how the Gender Institute can play a role in exposing, in working with, in monitoring, in creating awareness about these challenges. The first of all, of course, is the current financial and economic crisis that we think, because of the media, affects men more than women. I urge you to go to a report that we co-authored with Oxfam, and it was finalized about a month ago, and it was given to Commissioner Reding, where we have hundreds and hundreds of statistics and documentation on how, what we call the report is the invisible crisis, how this crisis, where women had very little to do with it in terms of decision making, had a bigger impact on women, and is going to have a bigger impact on women than it has done on men. And then I want to really focus on how we need to ensure equality between women and men as a goal in itself. If I can be a little bit informal here, I am sick and tired of hearing people say that equality is a good business model. I don't want to hear that anymore. Equality between women and men is a fundamental right. It's in the treaties, it's a question of justice, it's a question of legitimacy, it's a question of democracy. And once we've achieved that, there's lots of documents that we try to ignore that point to the fact that we will have more prosperity and we will have less violence. But we need to have this goal in mind, rather than the other way around. I'm sorry. I'll skip some of the slides, being very conscious of the time. So what do we have at the moment? As I said before, we have, of course, the EU 2020 agenda that is very weak when it comes to gender equality. It's a little bit better since last week. The text has improved after a lot of pushing and shouting, and now it includes gender mainstreaming in it somewhere. It's not good enough, but it's better than it was. We have the Lisbon Treaty, so we have the possibility for citizens, not very easily, but to make their point and act. So that's a good start. And we have the Charter of Fundamental Rights that we need to use as a guiding light. We also have a new Commissioner for Fundamental Rights and Citizenship. And I want to, with all respect, to disagree with Daniela on whether this will change how gender equality is treated. I think it will fundamentally change it. Because now gender equality is about social matters and employment. And what the signal that the Commission is giving, I hope this is the signal, and the Council by accepting this, is they're saying actually gender equality is a question of fundamental rights. And this is how you get violence against women on the agenda. By having political leadership take a stance and say, yes, we need to work on that because it is about equality and it is about fundamental rights.